Happy Monday, everyone. I am Hunter, aka the Ultra American ttrpg, aka the Jim Jones of Classic Gaming, because everyone plays games, friend. And so today, I will be doing a review of my buddy Jack the Lost Lore Scholar's video about Tieflings apparently going woke. Are they? Well, I guess we're about to find out here in just a little bit. So, some kind of context before I get into this, as many people out on the social medias do know, I myself am a fan of Tieflings as a playable race in most TTRPGs. I like how they look, I like their character designs, and I also like at what they can provide to the table as for storytelling purposes. But I also do agree with the sentiment that's kind of floating around out there that, especially in today's climate with the DEI and dragons, as I call it, that tieflings are very much overused now and are basically symbols, kind of quote unquote, of the woke agenda now in tabletop. But that's enough about that for me. We're going to watch this video and I'm going to pause every now and then, kind of share my thoughts about it. We'll see some familiar faces and names probably throughout. And yeah, that'll basically be kind of just the majority of this video. So let us get started.
This video is brought to you by Elven Maid Inn's Tales from the Tavern magazine, issue number 2. Right now, the PDF is free on her Ko-Fi page. There will be a printed version coming soon to Drive-Thru RPG, much like issue 1 has been printed. It includes an interview with Robert J. Kuntz, an article about the Satanic Panic by my co-host over at Nerdcognito, Dying Breed TT, and yes, I've even written an article about apolitical fantasy in there. It's free. Go pick it up.
Yes, so as for this product placement here, I too have a PDF of Tales from the Tavern, issue number 2 by the Elven Maid Inn. I will make sure to post that link in the description of the video to where you can download the PDF. It is on both Coffee and Drive-Thru RPG. And on top of that, because it's just made me remember too, I will make sure to post where you can watch Jack's video as well and where you can follow him as well in the description of this video as well. So you can find all that information down below in the description box for Jack and for Elven Maid and all that. So let us continue.
There has been much ado about tieflings of late. I was first inspired to make this video when Harmony Ginger, the Dungeon Delver, the Elven Maid Inn, and several others chimed in about how they really dislike tieflings and they really dislike monstrous races in general. And so I asked one of them in particular to create a little rant for me. So, Elven Maid, what do you think about tieflings?
Why do I hate tieflings, you ask? Well, here's the simple answer. You see, I don't just hate tieflings. I hate them all. All the monstrous races. Whenever that tieflings, drows, dragonborn, or even minotaurs. I hate them all. You see, Lovecraft once noted, the oldest and strongest emotional mankind is a fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown. By introducing those monstrous races into your game, you risk dismantling the primal fear that those creatures inherently invoke. Do you really want your game to turn into Carnival Row? Or spectacle where demons and drows are just part of everyday snaring? Think about it. Think about it hard. Don't be stupid.
So that was the Elven Maid Inn, who I am a big supporter of, and I also follow her on X. We'll post that in the description as well. Now, this is where me and her have butted heads many times. Well, first off to point out, drow are not monsters. They are technically elves, which makes them humanoid. They're just usually the evil version of the elf mostly. They're in books as either drow or dark elves. And I also like playing those races as well. My first time I ever played D&D, I played as a dark elf gunslinger named Shahana. And she was kind of this dark and mysterious, just kind of doing her own thing, but she was helping the party just to fulfill her own needs. And I actually shared that artwork on my X that was done for her by my buddy Patty Parlor. And so if you want to go back and try to find that on my X account, you can. But there's I have this issue when it comes to being restrictive on like what you players can and cannot play as. Because my thing is, if it's in the book, it should be allowed. I'm not big on restricting players from being unable to create their own character designs for the most part. I have no issues with people playing as like centaurs and minotaurs. None of that bothers me. Now, if it's your table, you play as you want, the setting allowed. That's the one exception I'll make is if your setting is very specific in like what is and isn't allowed. But other than that, I think it's really stupid to just be like, oh, because tieflings are monsters, they all deserve to die and all that. It's just completely stupid, I think. And it's not excuse me. And it's not wrong for the wolf to say that he is smarter than the sheep. That's another big thing too. So, let's continue with what Jack is going to say now.
The Elven Maid's point is, well, made. This comic from Dungeons and Doodles by Doodle Poodle sort of gives another view to the same issue, and that is that monstrous races, of which tieflings tend to be the most popular, are not as uncommon as one might think. They're viewed as some sort of customization option rather than a character trait. Indeed, you can see that there is a couple of tieflings in the back there saying there aren't enough corners for them all to brood in. You'll notice, especially in the middle panel, that the human fighter is being scolded for being plain and boring and unoriginal, despite the fact that she is the only human fighter there. This sort of falls over the tropes of a character needing to look unique in order to be interesting. Indeed, having a skirt as a female fighter is disparaged here, though the female player is in some sort of bulge thong. You may play what you may play, of course, but the point is made that tieflings are somewhat overdone to the point of being nonsensical, considering that a tiefling is supposed to be the result of a demonic bloodline. And in
I'm going to pause it right there because there's some points I want to touch on here. So, a big fan of Doodle Poodle who made this artwork, and I think it was like Dungeons and Doodles also as well. They have a YouTube channel that I try to watch every now and then because I'm trying to catch up with all their stuff. Because I'm just always finding new stuff to listen to and enjoy, and I like these comics. So, on one hand, my thing when I come to creating player characters for my games, when I actually do get to play, is why would I want to play as just another human when I'm already human enough? The entire point of a fantasy TTRPG is you're in this world full of magic and wonder and all. So the fact that some people just want to be, oh, human fighter, that's boring. I don't want a boring campaign. I want to have fun. I want excitement. I want adventure. I want action. And that's what is a big issue I have with a lot of like current games going on today is they may have like more of one thing than the other, and that makes it really hard to enjoy because it's a very unbalanced with the content that's in said game. You may have all this action, but then there's no no story to go with the adventure. You have all this story, but then it lacks in action, and everything just seems to be going at a snail's pace. So, but I do agree with the point again about tieflings kind of being overused and the fact that they're trying to say, oh, she's not unique. Even though I believe, yes, every character should be unique. You shouldn't have all characters be the same unless you purposely wanted to do that, like an Oops All Wizards or an Oops All Bards campaign. If you just want to be funny and do that. Each character should always be unique in their own way. You should never have two of the same characters. Alright, let's continue.
fusion of evil, something to be feared. And yet, rather than that, we have this sort of new art amongst the new Dungeons and Dragons 2024 material. They have ceased to be these outlying outcasts. They are now instead some rainbow mirage of, well, this looked cool in the character creator. And so I would like to try and reclaim the Tieflings.
All right, so before we get into this next part that's about to come up, because I did actually watch this video before doing this, just to kind of get a feel for it. So he's about to go into a little story time here in a second with the character. But one thing I want to touch on is you don't have to play the Tieflings as these outliers or outcasts. It's your table. You play how you want them. The rule books are guidelines. You don't have to play rules as written. It's like that's the absolute stupidity of people saying that you have to play always rules as written because it's the correct way to play, quote unquote. It's absolutely just asinine. Your game, your rules. And then the books are just guidelines for how everything should work. And so Tieflings don't have to be outliers unless you want them to be. They don't have to be feared unless you want them to be feared. It makes no sense to have characters or people in a game be afraid of a character just because they're like a certain race. Orcs make sense. Goblins make sense. Orcs and goblins are usually the monsters that invade the villages and come in droves. Tieflings are not. Tieflings are the subject of either a deal that they made with a demon or a devil, or something that happened within the family. Usually it's like a parent or someone in the family made a deal with a demon or a devil, and they had a kid that became a tiefling because of that. And in that case, the kid's innocent. Just because they came out a tiefling doesn't mean that's what they want to be, and it doesn't make them evil by default. That's absolutely not true. Okay, let's continue.
And I have just the way to do it.
The young boy ran through the forest. His heart pounded in his ears. The beast was on his heels. He tripped, rolled, and landed in the roots of an old tree. The thing towered over him, hulking, yellow eyes ablaze, beak snapping. And then, like a bolt from the blue, a warrior stepped into frame. He slashed at the beast with his sword, drove it backward, only for the thing to clamp its massive arms around his shield, pick him up, and throw him clear. The beast walked up to the boy and the warrior, his helmet gone, stubs of horns on her face, jumped upon its back, and with a cry to some god, drove her sword into its spine. She breathed heavily, and the boy saw now a spined and pointed demonic tail where her cloak had once hidden it. She turned. Her eyes, they were red. They glowed. He screamed, picked himself up, and fled his rescuer. Quest let him go. She knew there were no more things to chase. She sighed. She knelt. Bahamut, if you would hear me, please grant me redemption.
Okay, so we got ourselves an interesting story here going on. We have a tiefling character who is basically on a quest to try to redeem herself because she sees herself as some sort of vile abomination. Now, again, this is not how you have to play your character. You can play your characters however you want, campaign setting allowed. But this, again, interesting story we got going on. Again, it's basically she's kind of pulled a what's the name of that? Hellborn. Wait, was it Hellborn? Yeah, it's Hell. Yeah, basically this character pulled a Hellborn where she cut off part of her the top of her horns like the guy did in Not Hellborn, Hellboy. That's what I'm thinking about. Just like Hellboy did in those movies where he like sanded down his horns to where they were just kind of nubs on his forehead. She basically kind of did the same. And so she's trying to grant redemption, and Bahamut is basically like the god of almost all good. He's this platinum dragon god deity. And so let's see what Jack has to say about this.
Quest Redemption is a tiefling fighter, not a paladin, at least not as of yet. She was born to two human parents, both of whom were devout religious individuals, but further in their ancestry, on one or either side, someone made a pact with a devil or a demon or some other infernal being. Many centuries hence, it resulted in the birth of Quest. Now, you might think it's somewhat on the nose that this woman would take the name Quest Redemption. However, in the Player's Handbook for 5th edition, Tieflings often take names of things they wish to embody, and they put aside whichever birth name they were given, if they had one at all, until it is achieved. In Quest's case, she wishes to redeem not only herself, but also the ancestor that has cursed her to be such. She enrolled into a knightly order, in this case one dedicated to Bahamut, and goes around slaying monsters and saving innocents who don't like her. She hides her gender because a woman wielding a sword is something that is not expected. At least that's how I'm choosing to write this character, as it's another hurdle for her to overcome. When she prays to Bahamut, her demonic blood burns, and the demon that holds her soul whispers atrocious things into her ears. Quest's entire character arc is to overcome her demonic heritage, to try and become human, and to become a fully fledged paladin. Now, why do I think this is compelling? Quest has many different things going on with her backstory that she has to overcome. She has to overcome the fact that she is a woman in a male dominated profession. She has to overcome the fact that she looks like a demon in a very religious world. Her horns, which she has shaven down and ground down to nubs through painful nights of picking away at them with whatever tool she had to hand. Her bony, scaly tail. These things are kept hidden beneath her armor and cloak. The claws on her hands and feet, under gauntlets and armored boots. And so she quests. And so she disguises her true nature. For when it is revealed, those that she would seek to protect are repulsed.
Okay, so again, like, I don't have too much more to say to this just because Jack kind of explains, for the most part, the reasoning behind this character and her reasoning for what she does, what she does. But as I was basically said earlier, again, setting aloud, you can have a story like this for your character. So because the setting that this character is playing in is like some very like high religious, they view her as a demon, basically. Now, I would never do that. I think that's not really that fun. If you're like in a world where there's elves and dwarves and orcs and goblins and all sorts of manners of creatures and beings, you want to say a tiefling's demonic. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. But I'm not going to knock someone for making their setting knock someone down completely for making a setting that views kind of different races that way. You still have to have good and evil, no matter what race embodies those moralities. Let us continue.
Note how the choice of tiefling is not an aesthetic choice. It is not there for mechanical reasons. It is not there because it is more interesting than human. It is her character traits, the burning desire for redemption, the need to protect others, and the want to be accepted that make this an interesting character. The horns, the eyes, the tail, the pointed ears are all byproducts of this process of character creation. It's a similar thing for Dragonborn. A Dragonborn wandering into a village in the far north of the Sword Coast near Icewind Dale would be a rare sight indeed, and would probably cause some panic, as
Now, this I have to really do a hard disagree on with regards to Dragonborn. The game is literally called fucking Dungeons and Dragons. You expect me to believe that these dragons that are also by lore can transform into different humans and go out and reproduce with other races, that there aren't going to be Dragonborns coming out from there because of that. Dragonborns would not be rare in Dungeons and Dragons. It would be actually a fairly common race because it's literally called fucking Dungeons and Dragons. Kind of the point of it. And so that's kind of like my thought on that. So let's continue.
people mistook him for a half-dragon. Indeed, I would recommend reading the first Legend of Drizzt books, where Drizzt has to struggle to overcome his dark heritage. I was on Wick TV's channel a little while ago, and I had to really explain the fact that the racial prejudices in these worlds exist for a reason. They exist because the majority of the time, people looking like this mean you harm in these fantastical worlds. It can be used to create incredibly in-depth characters. Now, at this point in the video, if you've not liked and subscribed, please do. And if you're wondering when I'm going to start talking about why Tieflings are woke, well, you've been bamboozled. This is actually a writing video.
Yep, that's kind of Jack going along with a lot of the kind of somewhat quote-unquote clickbait stuff that happens with some videos. Well, it does, well, we have kind of touched in why we think Tieflings kind of fall into the woke, those points were kind of brought up. A thing I will point out is, like I was kind of said earlier, kind of towards the beginning of the video, was I don't agree with the entire racial tension thing, because it's like, if you're just fighting people, oh, just because they're this race, I think that's a kind of a shit reason for like an adventure or a story hook. Like, oh, we have to fight off the goblins because they're goblins, not because of the fact that, oh, the goblins are actually like pillaging and burning down villages. Oh, we have to fight off the orcs just because they're orcs instead of, also the orcs have like kidnapped many villagers and are going to eat them if we do not save them. Those are more compelling than just having a storyline and having a fight just because you don't like what kind of race that character or NPC is. That's my thought process on that.
On a more broad point, you may take this. Monstrous races, despite the fact they are overdone by the modern player, in my humble opinion, can be very, very useful to the Dungeon Master for creating NPCs. I myself ran my most successful campaign having banned exotic races from my players. They were not allowed to play Tieflings or Dragonborn or such things. If a player decides they wish to play a Tiefling, they wish to play a Drow, then they must expect to have social consequences in the world in which I am running. Because the Dungeon Master's job is to simulate a fantasy world in which the characters live. Racial prejudice is a very real thing in these fantastical worlds.
But like I said, it doesn't have to be. That's all I'll say about that.
A half-orc is likely the result of something quite violent. An orc coming over the hill and looking at your village is cause to gather the militia, because there's going to be more coming. Do not play any sort of monster race if you are not prepared to be killed on sight, or if you're not prepared to build a reputation that outshines the evils of the rest of the members of your race.
Once again, just because you play a race does not mean that they are evil by default. And if your DM is saying that your character is going to be killed off because they are said race, that is a shit DM and you need to find a new table. There is no excuse as to why, in my opinion, you can't play a Minotaur, Centaur, Tiefling, Dark Elf, even though Dark Elves are not monsters, they are humanoid. But because of the reputation that Drow has in D&D lore, they're treated as very evil, depending on depending on like who you're interacting with. Like we said, there's a whole Drit storyline. I'm not gonna go in on that one because I know absolutely nothing about that because I stay far away from DEI and dragons as much as possible. And so let's see his final thoughts.
Oh, and do have fun. I have been Jack the Lost Scholar. If you've enjoyed this, please do share it about. It helps me a lot. I wanted to do a lot of different edits and all the rest of this sort of other stuff for this video, but I honestly do not have that talent. And I just wanted to get this off of my chest because I like Tieflings. I like Drow. I think they can be incredible characters. But they have to be approached with some gravitas, some respect, and a very sort of somber and heavy heart in almost a liturgical way. As I said, I have been the Lost Scholar, the chronicler of the Northlands. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Yeah, and so as we hold on one second, I don't want it to be on a black screen the entire time. So this is one thing where it's like me and Jack, we do disagree on quite a few things. We've not really butted heads, but we've kind of like this the Mexican standoff feeling a time or two. But as he said, we can both agree that, like he said, he's also likes tieflings. He also likes drow. How he goes about them and how I go about them can be completely different. And like you've heard me say, there's things I agree with this video and things I don't agree with this video. But we can all at the same day. Jack would still be a guy that I wouldn't mind having at my table, and I would hope and pray that he wouldn't mind having me at his table either. So speaking of which, since we're on topic of tieflings, let me share you mine. This right here, this is Rory King. He is a lawful evil, lawful neutral, draconic bloodline sorcerer multiclass with Path of the Berserker Barbarian. His story, he was raised in the village by a single mother. We'll say human because it's still kind of a backstory in the works a little bit. I do have some of the main details though, like how he was born and why he's a tiefling. A man one night came to his mother, and not knowing who this man was, but feeling the presence of this man around her, they made sweet love one night, and Rory King was a result of that. She did not know the man, she did not know what he was, but she slept with him all the same, and Rory King was a result of that, hence why he's a tiefling. Well, I would probably say the man was probably a devil of some sort, but that's still kind of up in the air. So, Rory King, being raised by a single mother in his village, of course was, because he was a tiefling, was also kind of picked on and bullied a little bit. But when he would run away from the bullies, one day he came across this, I call him a cult member, but it's basically was very much kind of like a Waco situation where there were these people that believed in this kind of deity or whatever it was they prayed to, and so they separated themselves from the village to not bother them and to be left alone. And Rory King met this cult leader that became eventually his mentor and best friend, helping him to reach into that draconic bloodline of his and activate his sorcerer's powers. The Path of the Berserker part comes from, again, kind of playing in with the draconic bloodline, the anger of the dragon that can be unleashed from inside him if he is pushed to that point. Rory King, he is red mostly because his bloodline from the dragon is, of course, the ancient red dragon. So at some point during somewhere in his family tree, his ancestors descended from an ancient red dragon of long ago. And so, the reason he is lawful evil, lawful neutral, it switches depending on how I play him. And depending on the game and how I play him. One day, when he was heading back to meet his cultist best friend, he saw smoke rising in the distance, and found that the village became suddenly afraid of this cult, and attacked them, slaughtered them all, and burned down their home. And he rushes there and finds his best friend, mentor, in his last dying breaths. And his mentor hands him a letter. And this letter contains secrets that can help Rory King gain further knowledge and further power. Because that is kind of how I play this character. He is very charismatic, being a sorcerer. His main thing is he is very knowledgeable, wanting to use wits over strength. He wants to sharpen the mind, and he uses that towards a lot of his spell casting. I flavor it as when he does the Wall of Flame spell, he breathes it out of his mouth via like Uncle Iroh does from Avatar in the last Airbender. When he does shield, it's very much kind of like how Doctor Strange does it in the Marvel movies. So I flavor these spells a little bit differently with him. And when that fire starts to build up, you see black smoke just kind of slowly seep from his mouth as he's getting ready to just blast whoever it is before him that he's fighting. And he carries a morning star with him, with retractable spikes, so when he squeezes just right, those spikes pop out. And so the reason he's lawful evil is because he doesn't go against the laws of the land. However, he knows and finds ways he can bend around those laws to achieve his own goals and means. Whatever it is that he can do to further advance his powers and his knowledge, he will find ways to do so. And it does not matter who gets in his way sometimes. And so, that is Rory King, my Tiefling, multi-class Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, Path of the Berserker Barbarian. And as you can see, the only thing that I did with him is I gave him the ram's horns. He doesn't have a tail, he doesn't have claws or anything like that. He is still very much humanoid-esque. I'll say esque because, again, he's a tiefling. But all he's got that say that he's a tiefling is the red skin, the eyes, and the horns. That is all he has. But that is Rory King. And again, I like tieflings, I like drow. Heck, I even like dragonborns. I remember I made a dragonborn character one time that he was a gold dragonborn. He lived in the village with other dragonborns. One day, I don't have this down for sure, but a group came and attacked his village. And in a moment of cowardice, my dragonborn character runs away, leaving everyone in that village to suffer their fate at these people that attacked them. So, he's a bard, and he travels from town to town, singing and earning off what he does. But, wherever he goes, following somewhere not too far off, are the spirits of his dragonborn village, are the spirits of those dragonborn villagers that only he can see and hear as he goes around, as he is haunted by his cowardice that he committed that day. And so, kind of to sum it all up, my thoughts and opinions, like I said, I'm very mixed with this video. I agree with some of it, I don't agree with a lot of it. But at the end of the day, like Jack said, it's your table. Play as you want, and make it work. Again, I am Hunter, aka the Ultra American ttrpger, aka the Jim Jones of Classic Gaming. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.